Hello, I'm Emma-Louise Coffey and you're welcome to the Dairy Edge, the Teagasc Dairy podcast. We're bringing you the latest information, insights and opinion to improve dairy farm performance. For part 2 of our end of year review, I'm joined by dairy advisors Jim Moyles, Ciara O'Shea and Seamie Nolan to review the profitability of Irish dairy farms in 2020 and consider how farmers coped with COVID-19. And first, Seamie summarised the milk price outlook from the beginning of the year.
At the offset of the year, I suppose things were looking reasonably positive for milk price. There was a lot of optimism out there. People, I suppose, if you look at the 2019 Profit Monitor report, the average co-op price was 35.17 cent a litre based on the 12 or 1,500 people that did Profit Monitor. So 2019 had a reasonably good milk price, and heading into 2020 was looking the same. I suppose then out of nowhere came this little problem that we've come to know quite well as known as COVID. And I suppose the forecast at that stage put out by the economists, etc., was that there was potentially going to be a 20% drop in milk price. And I suppose that didn't sit easy with farmers to some extent, and there was a couple of issues, I suppose, that concerned them at that stage. And I suppose maybe we'll talk about COVID later, but one issue was, I suppose, this potential drop of 20% in milk price, which would equate, I suppose, to about 6 cents a litre coming from where milk price was. Now, thankfully, I suppose that didn't materialise to any great extent. We did see a drop in milk price across the peak months, and it varied a bit maybe between co-ops. And I suppose it's when thinking back now, it's hard to remember exactly how much it fell, but it fell to the order of about 2 cents a litre. I think there was a number of successive cuts, maybe a little bit more, and which I suppose was tough at the time, because it's never easy to take a milk price cut over peak months, because farmers will always say that's when their money are made. You're at peak milk, and it's important to have a good milk price at across your peak months. But I suppose there was a sense of relief around that time as well, that the forecast 6 cents a litre or so drop did not materialise. I suppose looking forward into the rest of the year after that, milk price steadied, and I suppose we all know it has rallied a bit, and at the minute the markets etc. look quite positive for 2021. But of course the other aspect that's hanging over the heads for 2021, I suppose, is Brexit, and there is a forecast 7% decrease in milk price in a no deal Brexit scenario for 2021, which would equate to, I suppose, 2 to 3 cents a litre, depending on your co-op milk price at the minute. I'd have to say, I suppose, year to date, milk price, looking at the co-op performance reports and even looking at the outlook, the Teagasc Outlook conference there last week, it's predicted that the 2019 milk price will be similar enough, or the 2020 milk price, I should say, would be similar enough to the 2019 milk price on average for the year, you know.
And Jim, you have completed figures to a certain point in the year for farmers that you're working with. Can you give us an idea of where costs are at this year, and maybe reflecting on how they compare with last year? And if you have an indication of profit too, you might share it with us.
I work with kind of 3 discussion groups, and each of the 3 groups use the Teagasc Cost Control Planner to record their kind of farm income and receipts, and more importantly, assess their expenditure during the year. So this is kind of obviously used to kind of generate a profit monitor at year end. But as an add-on to this, in the month of October, we do a kind of a 9-month review of the year, and we generate a kind of a discussion group report where we examine a number of kind of farm costs per cow to the end of September. So this is kind of a useful meeting. You know, every discussion group is probably familiar with having an annual discussion group meeting on Profit Monitor in January or so, but we try to do this as an add-on in October. A lot of the costs, to be honest with you, are nearly in at that stage. We kind of work off invoice costs rather than payment date costs, you know, so that means we're able to benchmark and do a fair comparison. The first thing we actually look at, Emma-Louise, is milk receipts per cow. And this year to the end of September, for one of the groups, and I just selected one of the groups, there wasn't much difference between them, to be honest with you, but one of the groups, the milk receipts per cow to the end of September now was €1,660 this year, and the equivalent figure for the previous year, 2019, was €1,690. So back about €30 per cow. So I'd imagine, to be honest with you, that'll probably catch up before the year is out. Last year, the total receipts per cow would average just over €2,000 in terms of milk receipts on their own per cow, and I'd expect that to be very much at the same level for 2020. So that's in terms of the milk end of things. But in terms of the cost on farms, just on a per cow basis again, we looked at the dairy concentrate. I kind of have a column there in terms of dairy concentrate fed per cow to date, and that was up this year by about €20 per cow. So not an awful lot, up €20 per cow to about €210. It was 190 per cow last year. So the concentrate was up. That's probably a little bit of a reflection on the extra, someone who would have been affected by that mini drought I talked about before. But the fertilizer one, would you believe, was back a little bit now. Whether that spread less fertilizer or whether the cost of fertilizer was back, I'm not 100% certain, to be honest with you, but that was back around 25 to 30 euros per cow. So the saving on fertilizer kind of cancelled out the extra that was spent on the meal. Coincidentally, I do a column for vet and AI per cow, and that was identical in both years at 110 euros per cow for both years. So I just said that the receipts per cow are nearly the same. The costs are going to balance out nearly the same as well per cow. So I'm afraid it's not really very exciting. It might be even a little bit boring, to be honest with you. But in all, we're going to come in similar to what Seamie and Ciara were saying previously, very much kind of on a par with the previous year. Just looking at, Ciara mentioned about one of the core performance reports. I have the Arbonne one up to the end of October, and I just noticed that their average supplier got 32.8 cents a litre to the end of October for 2020. The equivalent price to the end of October in 2019 was 32.1 cents. So the milk price is going to be up a fraction, I think, in general. Milk solids will be about the same, and it's going to be very much the same as what we had for 2019. And if you offered that to a farmer in the month of February 2020, I think he would have took it with both hands, to be honest with you.
And I think it's a really, really positive note as we reflect at the end of December. You mentioned it, Seamie, at the start of the year things were very positive from a milk price perspective, and then things got very dicey, and there's a lot of external factors at play. Obviously we can never control our milk price, but we're currently dealing with Brexit and then COVID on top of that, and I guess this constant conversation about the fact that people aren't buying the croissants and the coffees out, so that higher end product and the higher end I suppose milk products that we sell as a country weren't in demand, and that was going to hit us in the region of 20%. So thankfully we didn't see that. I guess moving on to COVID, and it's I suppose it's the elephant in the room for every discussion that you have, regardless who you're talking to in the year of 2020. And I guess from a farming perspective, farmers by and large will work independently and quite remotely, but COVID did eliminate the opportunities to meet socially, and farmers are meeting at discussion groups, farm events, the co-op for dairy farmers maybe, and then I guess outside of that, whether it's a family gathering, a sporting occasion, going to the mass or pub, that's the common ones that farmers would talk about they've been missing this year. Can I get some experience from ye? I guess you're on the ground talking to farmers nearly, I suppose, every day, to hear what the experience has been for farmers and how they've coped this year with, I guess, a heightened level of isolation and a lack of activity. We might start with you, Ciara.
Yeah, so I suppose from talking to farmers there in groups, we kept the kind of groups going with link calls, and then we kind of moved over to Zoom there last month. So I suppose for groups it was we kind of got to still interact with them that way, and then I suppose for the non-group guys we were I suppose trying to call to them on the phone quite a bit, and keep interaction with them over the phone, then I suppose we were promoting all the online events and everything that way, just to kind of have something for them to interact with, you know. So yeah, like for some farmers, it was isolating, but it overall, like, I think they were happy because they're able to continue working, like, you know, and you know, they said that, like, you know, they're in a good environment, they're outdoors, and it was healthy, you know, place to be working, and they were grateful for all that. And yeah, like, I suppose as one farmer did tell me, he said that, like, one change for him was he had to kind of pre-order for going to the co-op, like, and he said that he noticed that he reduced kind of picking up little bits and pieces in the co-op, and he's kind of made savings that way. But like, that was probably one change for him as well. But overall, like, you know, I think we've done the best as what we can, you know, with the technologies of Zoom and link calls and that for farmers, and trying to keep on the phone to them, you know.
And any further comment from you, Seamie, in terms of feedback from farmers? You know, how are they coping with, I suppose, the conditions that they were dealt in 2020?
Yeah, look, I'd have to say that now in general, I suppose that farmers coped very well with it, you know, overall. Now I'm conscious, I suppose, that there are individuals out there that may be listening to this that didn't find it as easy as others, but in general, I'd say farmers coped well. And one of the things that I suppose that did really help was that you had fabulous weather during that first lockdown. We spoke earlier on about our mini drought, you know, during the month of April and May when we were all in lockdown, you know, you had fabulous weather, farmers could be out doing their jobs, and, you know, you'd be talking to lads on the phone and you'd say to them, how are you getting on? Oh, sure, I'm grand, like, I'm working away, you know. One big thing that for them was that they could go and do their work, the weather was good, it wasn't affecting them from a work point of view, as opposed to maybe some other people who were involved in other office jobs or whatever, who were locked up in a house and or in an apartment above in Dublin or someplace like that and couldn't get out at all, you know. They were out and about and they were moving. Yeah, they were meeting less people, less interactions. And, you know, one thing that we did notice, I know I definitely noticed anyway, was that when we did get back to the on-farm meetings, is that the attendances at the groups for that first meeting were very, very high, because people were looking forward to getting back and meeting some of their friends and neighbours, I suppose, that they mightn't have had to really be talking to in a long time. We suppose, like Ciara has said, we moved into in April. We were lucky, and I was lucky in that I had the on-farm meetings out of the way in March before lockdown came. We moved to link calls in April, and then into May, June, July, we were doing the Zoom calls. Yeah, the Zoom calls were fine to a point, but I think farmers were zoomed out, like a lot of us, you know, after a while, in that there was meetings left, right and centre coming at them. Everything was gone online. And we, I suppose, as a country, and that we took I suppose, a couple of generations of a leap forward in terms of technology that we never thought we would be dealing with at the onset of the year. But I suppose farmers embraced that as best they could. But the Zoom calls were fine in that you were interacting with farmers. But it was, I found it anyway, that it was a lot more difficult to get interaction out of them back and any kind of discussion going for various reasons. Through those meetings. And look, at the end of the day, there's nothing to replace the on-farm meeting, you know, and farmers realise that now too, I think, after their experience with Zoom and the other online platforms. We also, I suppose, stepped up a gear in terms of communicating with farmers through WhatsApp and all other sort of messaging services. And, you know, it just means of getting information out there to farmers where we could at all possible. And it worked well, like, and it continues to work well, and will continue to be used going forward as a quick means of getting information out to farmers. But overall, I suppose, Emma-Louise, I'd have to say that farmers seem to cope fairly well with the whole situation. The other point I suppose I want to make is that they had two big worries, I suppose, really. The one thing was that the co-op price, or that the milk price was this 20% drop in milk price going to fall, and the other thing was that would the milk be collected, you know? And I suppose credit has to go to the processors and the lorry drivers out there who kept the thing going through the whole lot. There was no big breakdowns anywhere, and I don't think there was any milk not collected in the country, which was a big relief to farmers out there.
I think that's a really interesting point, Seamie. And absolutely, it was maybe not so much discussed at length in Ireland, but there was an undercurrent of worry for farmers. I suppose particularly when we saw across other countries where there was, dumping of milk, or spreading it on the land, whatever way you want to call it. But if you were falling into that category, you were dealing with a lower milk price and then potentially no milk price or no milk check coming in the door. And absolutely, a lot of people might forget about the various people who are calling into the yard and the volume of people who are indirectly involved in your particular dairy farm. But that milk truck pulls up every second day, and sometimes they come in the middle of the night, so you forget all about them. You're not necessarily interacting with them. But there was a huge effort there, and I suppose particularly at peak, that real crunch time where regardless of what's going on, that's always a difficult time of the year in terms of there's a huge amount of milk, and I guess factories and the processors are at total capacity. So that's a really good point, and something that I guess luckily didn't cause additional stress for farmers. I suppose to you, Jim, anything different that you would have seen across your farmers?
Yeah, yourself, Ciara, and Seamie have covered off a lot of it, to be honest with you. I think, just to put things in perspective a little bit, my own opinion is that farmers wouldn't have been affected to the same extent of other sectors. Maybe that's fairly obvious to be saying that. Other small businesses and the service sectors, they had to pull down their shutters and close their businesses for periods of time. I think in the pubs, restaurants, hairdressers, and that, they were really have suffered the most. And I take Seamie's point. Maybe some of your listeners are going to have lost loved ones as well. And I'm not running it down, but from a farming point of view, a dairy farming point of view, that price collapse that was kind of talked about, that never materialized, which was a big plus. And at the time there was talk that that clients might be coming to advisors to need help with kind of business plans or loan restructuring loans if this price collapse happened. But thankfully that didn't happen. I certainly didn't have clients coming to me with applications to restructure loans, which can be a good thing. I had a note scribble here, but you covered it fairly well. But to me, I think dairy farmers, they owe a big debt of gratitude to their co-ops, and I know you covered it off pretty well. Collecting and processing every litre of milk that was produced across the country, that's a job in a tall order in any year, given the seasonality of production in this country and plants at peak capacity. So I think maybe a bottle of whiskey or something to your lorry driver wouldn't go astray this year. But they're not the only people coming to the yards. The AI technicians with the COVID came in there in March or so, and we're heading soon to the breeding season. But there was fears that AI technicians wouldn't be able to call, and the likes of vets and that type of thing. But I haven't heard of, I didn't hear of any cases where AI technicians weren't able to do their job. So I think there's a big debt of gratitude owed from the farmers to the people that service them. So I just want to say that, and then maybe go on to more kind of mundane things, that say the likes of the discussion groups and that we're working here with. Normally we'd meet kind of 8 or 9 times a year on farm. We'd have a couple of meetings indoor during the winter, of course, but this year we've only got to meet 5 times on average with groups this year. So we're well back. We're only at about half the number of on-farm meetings, and the GA used to have a tagline for inter-county championships a few years ago, that nothing beats being there, and it's very much the same applies to discussion groups. It's you need to be on farm. Look, we were making the best maybe of a bad hand we were dealt with COVID, but there's nothing like if you're going to be talking about grass, talking about cow condition, talking about facilities, it's being out there on the spot, on the farm. A lot of farmers, from the host and discussion groups, they're proud of the stock that they have on their hands. They're happy with the facilities, and it's an opportunity at discussion group meetings to show off those facilities and stock to their peers of farmers in their discussion groups, because generally with the numbers in groups, we're probably only getting around to group members every second year. So that was farmers felt the loss of that big time. Look, we worked with Zoom and you know, that was all great for the first couple of meetings, but the novelty kind of wears off after a period of time. And, you know, we know like internet's not fabulous across the country, and it can be very frustrating for farmers when they're trying to engage in a discussion or with other people, and the volume was breaking up and it's intermittent and that, you know. So look, I don't want to be over negative about it. There's plenty of positives in terms of what we could take maybe from the COVID lockdowns. You know, I suppose the likes of Zoom that I mentioned there, it did give us a forum that we could stay in touch on a monthly basis. We replaced the on-farm monthly meeting with a Zoom call, so that kept people in touch. I suppose if I was to pick a couple of other things, maybe out of, Seamie mentioned that we've all upskilled a lot on technology, farmers included, but you know, maybe opened our eyes a little bit into the future. I kind of I queried a few or surveyed a few discussion group members for their AGMs, and people said about the Zoom, maybe we could use it for a greater opportunity to bring in outside experts and researchers that wouldn't be able to commit maybe to come to a discussion group meeting on farm, but they could take half an hour, 45 minutes to join the group. You know, maybe, you know, somebody coming up from Moore Park or coming down the country, you know, the day we could avail of that maybe going forward a bit. I also like, we did derogation courses online there in November, December, and, you know, surprisingly enough, farmers can gauge it very well, and the experience of using Zoom probably for discussion group meetings kind of stood to them, and they made the derogation courses work an awful lot better. I suppose not just for discussion groups, but, you know, Teagasc events in general had to go online. We see an awful lot more webinars and even the dairy conferences online this year as well. But the likes of the Grass 10 virtual open days, being online, it actually, there's a big plus there, and it makes it more available to people who wouldn't normally be able to, for whatever reason, make the time or get away from their farms to see what was going on. Now all these things are recorded by the click of a mouse stick, and they can tune in at a time that suits them to view the webinar or podcast or whatever, you know. So that has to be a big positive. And Seamie mentioned about, you know, the use of WhatsApp. I know dairy advisors around the country and other Teagasc advisors kind of put an effort into making kind of educational short videos and posting them on YouTube as well, you know. So we've kind of learned to adapt with a little bit and trying to get messages out there. So it's not all negative anyway, you know. There's definitely some positives to be taken from it, you know.
So I suppose there with the link calls and the Zooms and that we were kind of being worn out with them, and it's something that like we decided to do, and I kind of created it with the host farmers. So we kept the host farmer there for the monthly meeting, and there was just an example there of like one of our host farmers wanted to discuss his calf housing and feeding and his own farm routine with the calves, and so we were all in lockdown and we couldn't get out to the farm, so we that host farmer just took little snippets of his daily routine and of his facilities on farm. So he sent them on to me then, and I put it all together, and that then created discussion for the discussion group meeting the next day. So it was great to have like the host farmer. It was like we're still on farm, but it was just done virtually, like, you know, and like, you know, the host farmer and all the other farmers were able to interact more, and because they had actually seen something from the farm, like, and like we did the same then with when we're discussing chlorine free, like, you know, and like we weren't able to go inside into the parlor or into the dairy or any of that, so like pre the meeting we videoed everything there, and we had it on the WhatsApp, and everyone is able to look at everything through the WhatsApp with their handout and with their video. And out in the field we discussed this topic of chlorine free as well. And then like I suppose it was great, like when the lads saying that like when we were out on farm everyone was able to meet socially distanced and everything that way. But then when the next lockdown came, we kept the focus of having the host farmer, and like we got the host farmer to take photos of his cows, of like different body condition scores. We got farmers to take photos of their grazing conditions pre and post, their silage results, and just different bits and pieces like that. So then I was able to put them in, and farmers could actually still see stuff related to the farm, and they were able to put that into the WhatsApp, like, you know. So I thought that was, you know, just something there that was able to kind of keep farmers in touch with each other as well, you know.
It's interesting, guys. We're in year 3 of the Dairy Edge, and this is our 3rd annual review. Despite the year that 2020 is, and you know, the I suppose the negativity associated with COVID, this has probably been our most positive review to date in terms of all of that's been thrown at dairy farmers during the year. You know, profitability is going to be really strong on dairy farms. And I think, I suppose, to wrap up on your point, Jim, dairy farmers were not badly affected, and that echoes something that we actually discussed on the podcast back at the height of the first lockdown with Kevin Toomey, a dairy farmer. You know, he said the same thing. You know, inside the farm gate, things worked away as normal. Day-to-day life was unaffected, and I think, you know, a really positive year. You know, you all mentioned we're all zoomed out, and farmers are definitely in that category as well, and hopefully things will return to normal. As you say, nothing beats being there, and it would be great if we could get out consistently on dairy farms for our discussion groups in 2021. Thank you, Ciara, Jim and Seamie. That's it for this week's episode of the Dairy Edge podcast, and my thanks to Seamie Nolan, Ciara O'Shea and Jim Moyles for joining me on this week's show. Don't forget to rate, review and subscribe to the podcast. You can listen on Apple and Google Podcasts as well as Spotify. And for more information, go to the Teagasc website at teagasc.ie. I'm Emma-Louise Coffey, and join me next time for your Dairy Edge.